Since release, Battlefield 6 has lost on average 5,700 players per day, every day, on Steam alone. With an initial peak of 750,000 players upon release and 550,000 for the kickoff of Season 1, the game now only peaks at and often below 60,000 concurrent on Steam, marking a player drop-off of 92% based on peak averages since release. But if you want to give the game the benefit of the doubt and calculate since the release of Season 1, you'll still find a game that suffered an 89% player drop-off since the beginning of its live service. A live service whose entire job was to drive player engagement, spending, and retention, but is now helping take a game that started with millions of players and drive that number to as low as 20,000 players per weekday per platform. And I say all this because mathematically, Battlefield 6 will be heading into Season 2 with virtually no players. And thus, DICE has to view Season 2 as not just some filler content, but instead an entire soft reboot of the game only 120 days after release. 60,000 players per platform isn't something to sniff at, but from the perspective of EA, who spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the project across 4 world-class studios just to see the game fall behind indie projects like Helldivers and their own 6-year-old Apex Legends, I can't imagine you'd be happy as you openly state live service content accounts for about 75% of your total revenue. So the question is, can a game that targeted 100 million players survive off tens of thousands? Probably not, and Season 2 is already looking like a make-or-break moment for the title, not even 4 months into the game's lifecycle. Or even worse, with such great sales numbers and the player drop-off immediately after, will they just take the money and run? Will they double down and support the game, or pull back after their initial success and cash out, leaving players out to dry? But guys, if you enjoy in-depth reviews and discussions on all things Battlefield, drop a like and hit subscribe, and let's talk about the abysmal state of Battlefield 6 as we head into Season 2. So, to kick things off, for those of you who are new here, I play Battlefield 6 almost every day. I've praised a lot about the game, from its multiplayer fundamentals to its willingness to offer players a free-to-play point of access and a third flavor of gameplay with RedSec. In general, like most fans, I acknowledge the game's massive potential and strong bones. The game has all the workings of a great shooter, and more importantly, a great Battlefield. But sadly, just as the franchise regained its momentum with the massive hype and sales figures of its current title, it seemed like Battlefield Studios just packed up their bags and stopped trying. Underneath all that hype was an idea that wasn't totally cooked. What should have been issues found and fixed in their months of supposed game testing, like weak netcode, ghost bullets, and a broken audio engine, were swept under the rug and then cautiously leaked out by developers and patch notes as the studio couldn't hide their mistakes. Things like audio disappearing due to memory constraints, hit-reg desync, and RedSec crashing mid-game are examples of massive issues that are either being fixed far too late or aren't being fixed at all, after 4 years in development and 4 months after release. And over 100 days since launch, the game sits feeling abandoned, with senior talent admitting the game still suffers from gunplay issues like recoil that randomly changes value mid-gunfight, while also promising to fix AI-generated paid cosmetics, yet continuing to drag their feet while still offering the AI trash to unknown customers. I know there's a lot of conversation around content, and I personally don't really care. The game certainly needs more content, and we can see it coming. However, on principle, Battlefield 6 should have released with significantly more content when accounting for its cost, development time, and resources. As Battlefield 4 released with a campaign, more maps, and over 80 weapons with fewer devs and resources. I'm not upset with 9 maps at release, but I am mad we're paying more and getting less quantity and less quality. So with all that being said, the bugs, the lacking content, and the player drop-off, I'm afraid DICE has recognized that Season 2 is make or break, and thus have delayed the Season 2 release and gone silent as they scramble to figure out how to course correct before it's too late without the guidance of Vince Zampella. And while the content we've seen so far, like the leaked cosmetics in Season 2 map Contaminated, look like a step in the right direction, I simply don't believe Season 2 significantly changes or saves the game. If you think that suddenly 100 days after release, after years in development, they suddenly put 2 and 2 together, I hate to tell you, you don't know EA or DICE. The failure we're witnessing isn't some tragic mistake, it was all by design. A game that catered to Call of Duty fans with an uninspired battle royale, wacky cosmetics, and a campaign that was obviously cannibalized halfway through represents form over function. Battlefield 6 gained our attention but lost our interest. And while we can pretend that big maps and more guns will bring players back, the fact is, it won't. I'm sure we'll see a spike in the player count, but Battlefield is currently in a position where, on average, they have to convince 9 out of every 10 Day 1 players to return, something I don't think is happening with a simple Season 2 content drop. I think a lot of players showed up those first few weeks before RedSec, before the patches, and simply had an underwhelming or busted experience, and from then on jumped ship to more promising, interesting concepts like Arc Raiders that currently sees 250,000 concurrent players a day on Steam alone, via a game made by a much smaller indie studio. EA is paying insane prices, giving the developers everything they could dream of and hundreds more staff than ever before, and are getting almost nothing in return aside from those huge Day 1 sales, which Arc Raiders also beat with a lower price per unit. So just imagine the payroll between all 4 of those studios every month, the paid marketing spend, influencer commitments, and so on, while EA watches their player base fall off a cliff and the player spending go with it. If Battlefield 6 didn't have such huge costs surrounding it, I wouldn't care nearly as much. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine EA's new owners will be excited to watch a several $100 million investment fall behind their 6-year-old Apex Legends that's on life support. At the end of the day, Season 2 can't just be Season 1, but a little bigger. It honestly needs to reboot the game with entirely new systems, refined UI, better performance, player incentives, and a wave of bug fixes, balance changes, and polish. However, while I say that today, the time for that polished foundation was supposed to be months ago, ideally with DICE putting the finishing touches on a few weeks before Season 1. But here we are, going into Season 2 demanding new content, while the devs are stuck re-engineering core mechanics like hit reg, recoil, and hopefully visibility and audio. Because DICE telling players that they fixed the audio is the greatest psyop they've tried to pull, as ziplines, vehicles, parachutes, and other cues still drop out and fail to register in the hellscape that's Battlefield 6's audio design. And at this point, I know there's a lot of people out there asking what changed. Everyone loved the game a couple months ago, so why is everyone crying about things now? The difference is that 4 months ago, we were happy to look past all the issues and focus on the positives. But now as time passes, not just have they ignored massive mechanical concerns like game crashes, but they've actively attacked the player base with AI cosmetics, Call of Duty ripoffs, and content delays on top of a lackluster Season 1. The vanilla game gave us hope, and eager to capitalize, Battlefield Studios threw the baby out with the bathwater, jamming in terrible cosmetics, ignoring foundational concerns, and racing ahead with an underbaked live service. For me, it's the bugs that have made me lose faith. For others, it's the cosmetics, and others beyond that, it's the broken balance or lacking content. Battlefield has managed to fail on almost every front and disappoint almost every kind of fan. If it was just a matter of content, I wouldn't be that upset. But now I'm just asking, what else will Season 2 break? How much longer before they put actual effort into RedSec? Or how much longer will EA sustain this game before they start moving studios off the project? because at this rate, Season 2 might determine those choices. Will EA roll back efforts on RedSec? Will they move Criterion back to Need for Speed? Or will they continue to double down? Although the juice really doesn't seem to be worth the squeeze unless Season 2 goes off like crazy, and they might just not care after all the money they made up front. At the end of the day, I'm sure there are some big discussions going on within EA and how they want to structure the Battlefield Live service, because as a publisher that went into this venture expecting tens or hundreds of millions of players, you gotta ask yourself, is a couple 100,000 players across all platforms worth the efforts of 4 studios? Personally, I'm not convinced. So unless Season 2 has something crazy up its sleeve or has plans for RedSec, like I discussed in this video here, I don't see a simple seasonal update changing the fortunes of what was at one point the greatest opportunity this franchise has ever seen. But guys, drop those comments below and let me know what Season 2 means to you. For everything else Battlefield, drop a like and hit subscribe, and as always, thank you guys for watching.